1996 Jeep Grand Cherokee ZJ. As you can see, a little burnt on the top, but given that I live in the Great White North, that's kind of what you want, because then you get ones that still have rocket panels. A little dirty right now, but overall, nice solid little car. Originally bought it out of Virginia in 2018, kind of as a college beater, and it never really changed. Basically, all I've done is kept it on the road, basic stuff, brakes, some accessory stuff, but nothing crazy. I will note, on all real beater cars, you gotta put good wheels and tires, and I have neglected these wheels rather brutally. But I did put a set of rather aggressive 235/70/16s on, and that is kind of how you have to do these things. Put a set of MK2s on it from BF Goodrich. They're terrible road tire, but I'm a lunatic, so went with those. You also kind of note, if you can see in the wheels there, I put on drilled and slotted just your power stops on the Racing brand brakes. Given how cheap they are, a lot better than I expected. Aside from that, the only part of it that is not stock is I did a transfer case swap. It originally had a viscous coupling slip in the middle, full-time four-wheel drive case in it, and what that meant was I got 11 miles to the gallon and couldn't park. So I just put a selectable case that I kind of cobbled together out of a Cherokee case and a later Grand Cherokee case that got me most of the long way. So, kind of just getting into what I'm going to be doing today. So, the crux of my problem is dead O2 sensor. So that is caused rather abnormally by not the O2 sensor going bad, but my clip that held the plug to the floor getting old, dry rotted, and breaking apart, and allowing the plug to fall down onto the catalytic converter and rub the drive shaft. So I went out to my local U-pull, grabbed the plug out of it, and I have to splice it on the one side, which I hate to do given that it's under the car and salts and just kind of everything adding up to probably not going to work all that well, but not much of a choice there aside from splicing it further back, and I don't want to kind of drag that out that badly. As opposed to splicing it on the other side, I did indeed just buy a new O2 sensor that I will then plug into. So, as opposed to just soldering it and hoping that I can get a good enough connection while laying underneath the car, I grabbed a set of these Dorman butt splices that have solder in the middle of them, so they are heat shrink and solder all in one. You kind of just stuff it on either end of the wire and hit it with a torch, melting it all together. Generally, I've had better luck with these, especially in applications where it might be wet or salty or what have you. But we'll see how it'll work. So, as you can kind of see down here, that this is the wiring that leads down to the sensor, and this is the wiring that's left out of the actual sensor itself. Originally, it's designed to be kept up and around here, and then into the sensor, and well, that kind of failed, which is unfortunate, but part of life. Now, I have, for quite a period of time, apologize for the wind. It's, I'm sure, ruining my audio. Soaked and done everything I can to kind of loosen that O2 sensor, but alas, not really working so far. And because of that, I've gotten to the point of requiring fire, which is unfortunate, but the case. Okay, so as you can see, things look a little bit different now. I had to get out my trusty hammer and knock the rest of the old O2 sensor off so I could get my breaker bar on it. Mainly that was due to my concern over the open-ended wrench just taking off material and turning that into a circle. You will notice the old one is not terribly burnt, but clearly showing signs of that 176,000 miles. Well, now that that's off and still way too hot to touch, I'm going to leave you for a moment while I go get some anti-seize. Okay, so gave you a bit closer view of what's going on. Basically came back with a little bit of anti-seize that I smeared on the threads. Not a ton, but just enough to avoid the misery of fire and violence, and not exactly what you want when you're working with old exhaust parts that don't like a lot of that. So, just gonna kind of ease it into the threads. To be honest, they're not great. Whole exhaust system is getting to the point of not being great, despite the fact that from the catalytic converter back is all technically brand new. And by brand new I mean maybe 4 years old, but I don't really drive this a ton. It kind of mostly sits around for utility stuff, like when I need to drag stuff around, or my daily driver gets broken because, you know, Fiat Chrysler. Okay, so that's in there enough to stay put. Now we get to have the fun of splicing wiring and rerouting all this. So, okay, so now comes the fun part of splicing a bunch of old wiring to old plugs that I got at a junkyard. So earlier I showed the heat shrink solder combination things that I tend to use, and I'm hoping that it will make this process somewhat tolerable instead of being just total misery. Okay, So, it's kind of hard to tell, but it's crucial when doing this to get a very good twist on the wiring and get it fed all the way down into the solder section of the splice, like so. Then you get your butane torch and do the heat shrink so it is all in place much better. And you want to make sure you get all the way around these. It's not like other kinds of heat shrink that'll just instantly go. But then you get to the solder in the middle and it melts nicely into all the wiring. And there you go. I, just due to how terrible the audio is going to be with all this wind, I'm going to shut you off and all of this is done. Just to kind of finalize this and hopefully ensure that all this wiring stays relatively good. Already spliced. Interesting. I am just going to wrap it in an ignorant amount of electrical tape that will hopefully keep it from having problems, but probably piss me off in a matter of months when something corrodes and stops working. But until then, covered in black, put it back. And shielding's probably not going to fit. The shielding's crap anyways. So with that, I now have a plug and can once again have a functional oxygen sensor. Now, to kind of avoid having that problem again, we're going to use some cable ties to fix all of this to the side of the transfer case. Now, when routing wiring underneath a car like this, you need to make sure A, avoid spinning mass, so that'll wear into it really bad, and avoid heat. So I'm going to attempt to tie it up and over the other side of the transfer case to some of these bolts. So one thing is I kind of ended up with a bit extra, which is the better thing to end up with compared to too little. But I'm going to have to coil it and zip tie it over to where I need it. Okay, slight intermission to, $70 on a full tank of gas, but